Now,
Befriended me on Facebook.
Facebook status update on Facebook. Getting on Twitter.
a show helping to expose the power of social media.
You can go on Facebook.
Say you write on Facebook. On Facebook.
This is the Tonya Hall Show.
My Facebook account was deleted by the man.
Now, here's Tonya Hall.
Welcome to the Tonya Hall Show, where we embrace the power of the web. Everything happening in social media, social business, marketing, world events, and much more. We talk about the latest and greatest in tech, what changes are taking place on the big platforms like Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, Pinterest, and more. And today we're going to talk about social media and business. We're going to talk about Facebook. We're going to talk about Twitter. We're going to talk about what happened last week and what we were talking about before what happened last week. You know, I have to say that there's been some really interesting posts this week, specifically today, already, that talk about just what happened last week, where we are. There's all kinds of conversations around social media and traditional media and reporting. We're going to talk in depth about that and why it's important to really think about how we're reporting the news today. Traditional media outlets like CNN and I think it was the New York Post got really put through the ringer for some information that they put out that was inaccurate. Reddit had to apologize for promoting something that actually came out over a police scanner, but started with a reporter who was listening to a police scanner. Binders Full of Women, which is a Facebook page, apologized for posting some information erroneously that they took off of a police scanner. But here's the thing. There was a suspect that was named in the Boston Marathon bombing, and it came across the police scanner. And I think a lot of this information that we shared did come from police scanners. And then was picked up by, rogue journalists / whatever that means, people using Twitter, social media journalists, if you will. And Facebook pages were promoting it. And so the fans of those pages were spiraling on with the same information. And so you had, all kinds of outlets, if you will, reporting things that weren't accurate. I felt bad for one of the original suspects, which was named. I'm not even going to say his name because I don't want to make it any worse, but the Brown student who went missing and probably was afraid to leave his home because it was misreported that he was a suspect. And clearly that was not who it was. And we're all suspect, I think, at some point. But how do we verify the information coming across social media? I mean, how do we make sure that the news that as consumers we're getting is accurate? And then should we be sharing it? I mean, should we be listening to police scanners and tweeting everything out? You know, one of the things that happened on Friday when it was hashtag manhunt and Boston was basically shut down. Watertown was shut down and people were listening to scanners. We were all, a lot of us anyway, were certainly consumed with what was happening. We were trying to get the information out as fast as possible, right? I mean, we were listening. We were trying to vet pictures that were coming out. Were these authentic pictures? We were following the Twitter accounts of the Boston Police Department, the mayor, and the FBI, reliable sources. But we weren't just going off of that information. We were listening to police scanners, which is candidly how we found out about the boat. But just listening to the scanner alone doesn't necessarily make it that's the actual, is it confirmed? I mean, these are policemen that are talking to one another. One of the posts that came out was that as social media users, please don't tweet out. Please don't post on Facebook. Please don't post on social media what you're hearing on the scanners. And I actually, said, hey, everybody stop posting addresses, stop posting information. In fact, there's some mainstream media outlets actually posted some information that was really confidential that they shouldn't have shared. But at the same time, the people that are using, they were worried that the actual suspect number two, the brother, was actually following on social media. So they were worried that he'd actually find out where they were, their location. But he's got access to the same links that we do, right? The scanners. We're going to talk about all of that, media reporting, what's happening today, and how do we how do we make it more authentic? Is it right to be first? Is it right to be more authentic and real and accurate? And how do we make sure that we're getting that? Are we all journalists? Are we not? We're going to talk about business also. We're going to get back to some of the things that we talked about before all of this came down. We're going to talk about Facebook. What is it? What is an actual Facebook fan or worth? There was a study that came out actually by our guest that's coming up, Todd Wasserman. Todd Wasserman is the business and marketing editor at Mashable, and he's going to talk about Facebook, what that's worth, this idea of reporting. We're going to talk a little bit about public shaming, which has been a topic off and on in conversation, and much more. Stay tuned to the Tonya Hall Show. We're also going to talk about Twitter music, which actually came out, I think it was on Thursday. I'm not sure, one day last week, and kind of got hidden under the brush. We talked about it a little bit on the show. We're going to talk more about it today and why it's important for Twitter to get engaged in music. I want to hear from you guys. If you've got questions, certainly you can go to our Facebook page. You can go to Tonya Hall on Facebook, or you can go to Twitter at Tonya Hall Radio. So be sure to stay tuned. Kevin, our producer, is certainly got his sense of humor on today. He's kind of distracting me. Kevin, stop distracting me. This is serious stuff. But I want to say one thing before we get to the nuts and bolts of this. I don't want to give credit to the people that are causing bad in our country. So I don't want to talk about the bad stuff, right? I don't want to talk about the fact that there are bad people doing things. I want to talk about the heroes and the stories. And I think it's a good idea. And I saw this on Facebook, and I thought it was really promising, that this idea of promoting the good, promoting the victims, and remembering the good that they did. Martin Richard, Ling Zilu, Crystal Campbell, and the officer Sean Collier, the father of the military person who was there, who actually helped victims, and the 14 others, by the way, in West Texas that lost their lives. Remember those people and the positive influence they had. But we are going to get to the nuts and bolts of business. So stay tuned to the Tonya Hall Show. Again, you can follow us on Twitter at Tonya Hall Radio, or find me on Facebook. Go to Tonya Hall on Facebook. Let us know what you think. We'll be right back.
Don't miss Boulder Chamber Orchestra's final concert of the season on May 10th and 11th. A star-studded event with Baum and Salas on the podium and Icing Shu on the piano performing all Beethoven program. Call BCO's box office today to reserve your ticket. 303-583-1278, 303-583-1278, or simply visit BoulderChamberOrchestra.com. The concert includes some of Beethoven's most beloved pieces, the mind-blowing Symphony No. 3 and the Emperor Concerto for piano and orchestra. A fantastic way to end the season with a bang on May 10th and 11th. Simply call 303-583-1278 or visit BoulderChamberOrchestra.com. See you at the concert.
Hi there, this is Barb Basher, and I'm heading up the YMCA's fundraising campaign this year. I have the absolute pleasure of working with more than 75 volunteers in this great community of ours, and our goal is to raise $90,000 to help our Longmont kids grow and thrive. I'd like to share with you the impact your gift will have. More kids will be ready for kindergarten, build on school success in camp, and learn teamwork and sportsmanship in youth sports. I don't know about you, but when I was a kid, if you wanted to play sport, you played a sport regardless of how much money your family had. Unfortunately, that's just not how it works these days. Now, cost is often a barrier to kids playing, and to have a child sit on the sidelines because their family doesn't have the extra funds is such a shame, and it breaks my heart. I truly believe we are all connected by one purpose: to help all of our kids learn, grow, and thrive, and become productive citizens. Won't you please join me in this important cause and make your own gift? Help us help improve the lives of the kids in our community. Go online to longmontymca.org/donate, mail it directly to the Y at 950 Lashley, or give me a call personally at 303-775-2994. I'll be more than happy to drop by and pick it up. Whatever works best for you is what I want to do. Thanks a million.
After the biggest weekly drop in 5 months for the S&P 500 index, stocks are continuing to slide. From Bloomberg World Headquarters in New York, I'm Charlie Pellet. Stocks are declining as sales of previously owned homes unexpectedly dropped in March. Also, investors are weighing corporate earnings. Wall Street's biggest bond dealers see little chance the Federal Reserve will slow the pace of debt purchases designed to boost economic growth before year-end, even as policymakers face calls to curb the buying. With more, here's Bloomberg's Michael McKee.
But it's really kind of a pointless exercise in guessing for a couple of reasons. One, it's so far out, you don't know what's going to happen to the economy. And two, this is a policy designed and pushed by Ben Bernanke. And there's a very good chance he's not going to be there. January of 2014, his term is up.
The Dow Jones Industrial Average is down 78 points, a decline of 0.5%. S&P 500 index down 5, a drop of 0.3%. NASDAQ is down 0.1%. That's a Bloomberg Market Minute.
And now a check of the temperature at the Denver International Airport, where the current reported temperature is 45 degrees, 7 degrees on the Celsius scale.
Welcome back to the Tonya Hall Show, where we embrace the power of the web. How is the internet actually changing our lives? How is it changing the way that we report news, which I've talked a lot about the first segment. And again, I don't want to talk about necessarily the bad news, although I don't think we always get everything that we need from our government. That's a whole nother show, and we should probably talk about that because I think there's a lot of information we don't get. But how, as you know, citizen journalists, if you will, and by that I mean everyone on social media, so even like my parents and everybody else who's using social media, how are we reporting the news? Our guest, who's going to talk about lots of things, including Facebook, home, Facebook worth, fan worth, Twitter music, and much more, is Todd Wasserman. He is the business and marketing editor at Mashable, and we love having you back on the show, Todd. Thanks for your time today.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. Appreciate it.
So we went on this little rant on break about just this idea that we're all vulnerable, right, to being not only maybe you were traditional journalists, some of us might just be people using the web, but we all are victim to potentially getting misinformation because of what is considered a quote unquote trusted source, right, Todd?
Yeah, well, I think we're all learning. It's still, social media is still so new that, we didn't have the option 10 years ago when we heard about things, to tweet about them, and now we do, and we're kind of figuring out that maybe we shouldn't tweet about certain things at certain times,
So the Facebook page, I mentioned this, I think, in the first segment, Binders Full of Women, apologized for posting something they heard on the scanner, which was, and I'm not going to mention his name again, I think he's been through enough, but the Brown student who had gone missing, they accused him of being a suspect, right? But their response in their apology was, I am not a journalist. I am only relaying information from the Boston Police Department scanner and news sources. But are we all journalists? I mean, you said something on break that I thought was really important. In the past, it would be accused of libel, right, if we misreported something. But you said, but hey, we're all reporting it, so they can't sue everyone on social media, right?
That's true. Also, if it's always been very difficult to win a libel case because you have to prove malice. You have to prove that a reporter had a picture of you, on his dartboard somewhere, and that's almost never the case. It's more often it's journalistic malpractice. Now, to me, tweeting something that's news that you're sharing with people and then saying I'm not a journalist is a cop-out, I think, because it's not like a doctor where you have to get a license to become a journalist. Anyone who assumes the role of a journalist is a journalist, in my opinion.
I think you're absolutely right, and we all have to take ownership. You and I were talking about trying to figure out what we should be tweeting, what we should be posting. I tried so hard to make sure that I didn't post something that wasn't accurate. Somebody called me out when they had the second suspect in the boat, and they were, surrounding the boat. I posted that it was confirmed, right? Because they felt like this was the guy. But is it really ever confirmed until it's done? I mean, it's how do you label everything? And again, they asked us not to talk about addresses or the actual location of the Boston police. But if they're listening to the scanner, which is where this information is coming from, they're getting the same information. I mean, it's just a link that people are tweeting out. Hey, here's a link to the scanner. You can listen to it live stream, and there were several sources that you could listen to the scanned information. So how, as a journalist, you're a journalist, you work for a major media outlet in tech. I mean, how are you guys approaching this? I mean, how do you make sure that you stay ethical? I get the urgency to get, especially in a situation like the manhunt that was taking place on Friday. Everybody was glued to their computers and televisions and second screens or fourth screens. So how do you make sure that you're still up there and up front with being, quick and vetting the information?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, one of the real positive things about social media is you have official accounts. Like a lot of people from the Boston police had an official account, which was tweeting out things during that manhunt on Friday. And if it's coming from the Boston police, then, unless the account is hacked or something like that, you can be pretty sure that the information is legitimate. The problem is that, major news organizations like CNN got the story wrong. And, everyone was following Boston Globe too, and they did a great job covering it. But I think at this point, to retweet, so-and-so is reporting that this is happening, it's kind of a judgment call. It's like, well, CNN says it's happening, and it's CNN, so they're probably right. But, it's really touchy, and I think that people are still kind of working out. And, this situation, I think, is going to be looked at as sort of a watershed moment of real-time reporting. What I think is you saw CNN get the story wrong, but then you saw NBC got the story right consistently. So next time around, people are going to say, I'm going to follow NBC. They seem to know what's going on. Until NBC screws up the next story, that's the best we can go on between that and the official accounts.
So this conversation has been coming up. I have brought this up many times. I really think there needs to be some sort of, verification, some sort of clout or some sort of cred, some sort of, authenticity rating for journalism, because I think it's very confusing right now. I am as a citizen, as a user of social media, as a consumer of the news, I am confused about who to listen to. And I love Mashable. I mean, I follow Mashable, especially for tech news. I follow certain outlets for certain types of things, but even the outlets that I follow could potentially get it wrong, right?
Well, yeah, anyone could get it. I mean, the Boston police could get it wrong, conceivably, while they're reporting or sharing the news with people. But I do think, and you saw it like with the New York Times coverage, they had screwed up the coverage of, I forgot the last major event that was sort of like this, and they had gotten some details wrong. And they were really careful this time around not to try to be first, but to try to get the story right, and they did a very admirable job of that. And I would venture to say that CNN is going to be a lot more kind of gun-shy the next time they have a big exclusive that they want to share with the world. And you talk about a certification. I don't think it's needed, because I really think it's the market kind of figures out who the reputable news sources are. Not only in choosing to go there, but there's a lot of commenters out there. There's a lot of people who want to set you straight when you get something wrong. Believe me, I know from firsthand experience, people love to comment when you get something wrong, and they do it quickly, and there's a pile-on effect. So I kind of think it's self-regulating.
I think owning it too, if you do make a mistake, and we're all human, makes a big difference. This is why I think Binders Full of Women, the Facebook page, who didn't really own it, they kind of, said, hey, well, it's not our responsibility. And I think what you said about that was so true. I mean, if I make a mistake, I'm hopefully going to own it. I'm hopefully going to say, you know what, I shouldn't have posted that, or disregard that post. And I want people to call me out, but we do tend to react pretty negatively. And I think you're right. I think certainly we can try to vet that, but it's situations like what happened in a crisis, especially when things are moving really quickly. And I think that is I think to your point, that's going to hurt CNN and their credibility immensely, because not only are people not going to trust them, but they're also going to go slower to react. They're not going to be the first place that I'm going to hear about it, because they're going to wait until everybody else has reported it before they come forward. So we'll have to see kind of how. I mean, I remember there was a time way back in history where I actually did follow CNN. Certainly that doesn't happen today. And it's just be interesting how that plays out. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, okay.
No. Please continue.
I mean, they weren't the only ones to get it wrong. The New York Post made a real kind of egregious error, putting those guys on the front page of the newspaper that day when there was already a lot of reports out there saying that information was incorrect. And that's print, and that's sort of more indelible even than putting out a tweet or putting on an online story, which can be corrected. But everybody makes mistakes, and it's very painful, believe me, when you get something wrong to admit you made a mistake, but that's the best policy. And one problem, I think, with online media is there's no consistent way of acknowledging that you made a mistake. A lot of times you just kind of you redo the story, and the next time you see the blog post, it's corrected, and you never knew, that they got it wrong in the first place.
Well, and what does that say about the future of print? To your point, I mean, we joke about it, and we also talk about it very seriously. The future of actually printed news. I mean, are people going to trust when they pick up the paper at their doorstep in the morning anymore? I mean, especially when you can get it so much faster by just turning on your computer. I mean,
that's the edge that you would think that print has over online media. By the time they're setting it on page, they should be really sure that this is correct information. I read the print version of the New York Times over the weekend, and it was nice to kind of get their full expanded view of, reporting of what happened, and knowing that this isn't speculation, that they really kind of, they really got the story. And I think there's a future for that. People still want to read in paper. I know I do.
Wow, Todd Wasserman giving a shout out to the print industry. That's kind of crazy. Wouldn't have suspected that. I want to talk about a couple of other things. Google Glasses, which kind of got pushed aside. Today is Earth Day. What does that mean? Is it relevant? I mean, every day is some sort of day. I mean, was it Hot Dog Day, Donut Day? And then public shaming is also a conversation. You actually wrote an article recently about Facebook fan worth. Are Facebook fans worth something? What does that mean? Stay tuned. We'll be right back.
Continues to be a tough drive into the Boulder area for your Monday morning commute. This traffic report brought to you by Garmin. A little slow on the diagonal and the turnpike trying to get into Boulder. That southbound drive on Highway 119, struggling from Niwot down through the Gun Barrel area into North Boulder. A few extra minutes on that drive. Just a lot of cars trying to get into the town. Same for that drive on the westbound side of the Boulder Turnpike. Slow through Superior on that approach to McCaslin. Otherwise, I-25 looks good in either direction of Longmont. Northbound's no delays up towards Loveland all the way into Fort Collins. Southbound drive, as you make that drive through Thornton and Northglenn, gets heavy in the usual spots we see every morning around 104th. That's a few extra seconds down towards 84th, and it's break-free, and morning drive's kind of thinned out around the Denver area. Highway 34 looking good between Greeley and Loveland each direction. Highway 85, no delays between Brighton, Fort Lupton, Evans, all the way into Greeley. Hate traffic? Don't be a hater. Get a Garmin New View with subscription-free HD digital traffic. And avoid it with updates as often as every 30 seconds. Drive with Garmin, the most trusted name in GPS. For more information, go to sigalert.com. I'm Cub Buning, and that's traffic.
Here is your updated weather report from the RCN Weather Center. This morning, Denver can expect some rain showers to begin things as it cools off here as the day goes along. Rain mixes with some wet snow showers at times. We'll see a gusty breeze at times to about 30 miles per hour or so. Maybe one slushy inch of snowfall by later on today. Into your evening, snow in the forecast. Could see by morning here 2 to as much as 4 inches. Again, that gusty breeze as high as 25 miles per hour for a time as it cools off by morning here to 22 for a low. By tomorrow on Tuesday, you may see a stray snowflake to begin, wrapping up by midday, 37. Front range weather is heard twice each hour here on AM 1060 The Biz, your trusted source for health and wealth information. I'm Dave Murs from the RCN Weather Center.
Brought to you by Conoco. Conoco is rewarding drivers who treat their cars right. Look out for their cash back, and you might find more than loose change in the backseat. Visit Conoco.com for more. Conoco, because your car knows.
Politicians are not kings. Let me say that again. Politicians are not kings. They're not superior to citizens, and their job is not to tell us the food we can eat, the soda we can buy, or how we should best defend ourselves. Who's to tell me how many bullets are enough to defend me during a rape? 1 bullet? 5 bullets? 10 bullets? How about as many as I need to stop the rape? These politicians, these bureaucrats, need to be reminded that we're all free to make our own decisions. We all have the right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And if guns aren't right for you, don't own one. But don't you dare tell me how to best defend myself. I'm Laura Carno, an ordinary Colorado citizen who believes in the Constitution. Join me at IamCreatedEqual.com. That's IamCreatedEqual.com. This message paid for by IamCreatedEqual.com.
Do you have a problem with a debt to the IRS or know someone who does? Remember to listen Sundays at 10 a.m. to the TaxClosure.com radio broadcast. TaxClosure.com is heard every week on AM 1060 The Biz, Denver, Fort Collins, Cheyenne, and AM 1580 Real Radio, Colorado Springs, Pueblo. TaxClosure.com is the only radio broadcast that may be the answer to your IRS problems. That's the TaxClosure.com radio broadcast every Sunday at 10 a.m. on this station.
KRCN Longmont, Denver, Fort Collins, AM 1060 The Biz, 50,000 watts.
Have you ever dreamed about the perfect trip to Paris or what shoes to wear in Patagonia?
Would you like to learn from the world's top chefs? I'm Chris.
And I'm Darcy.
And we're hosts of Travel, Wine, and Cuisine Radio.
Join us every Saturday afternoon at 3 on 1060 The Biz as we take you on a delicious adventure into the world of travel, wine, and cuisine.
Visit twcradio.com for more information. Live life to the fullest. Travel, Wine, and Cuisine Radio.
Looking at temperatures around the region in Boulder, Colorado. Currently 41 degrees, 5 degrees Celsius.
Welcome back to the Tonya Hall Show, where we embrace the power of the web, everything happening in social media. Thanks, everybody, for joining us today. Todd Wasserman is our guest, and he is a business and marketing editor at Mashable and has all kinds of insights on things that happened before last week. I mean, there was certainly some news that came out last week that kind of got hidden. In fact, Todd, you were, first off, I have to say, you were showing some Colorado love on break. I mean, you were talking about how beautiful it is here. And I have to say, I mean, I always want my guests that love Colorado, I want to give a shout out. You said you had been in Crested Butte and some other places, and you said you had some friends in Colorado Springs. Is that right?
I do, yeah. The Wolves, WLF. If they're listening, hi.
we're gonna be like looking them up on Facebook. Do you do that? Do you actually like cyber stalk people? Like I do everybody. Like I look everybody up on social media. Do you do that, Todd?
Yeah, it's pretty easy. The hard part's if they have a very common name, then it's like, is that really the person? I'm not sure. LinkedIn is really good for that. LinkedIn's great for journalists if you want to like see where something ended up or what their title is or something like that. I use LinkedIn a lot.
I love LinkedIn. I have, and they've stayed pretty tried and true. I mean, they've locked down a little bit more, so you can't do as much as you could have done before on their free level of service, which I don't like. But you know, Facebook, ever since they changed the search feature this last time, I do not think I can get as much information. It just seemed to be much easier to use before. You got much more data, and now it's like I only get a few suggestions. I don't like Facebook search anymore. How about you?
You mean graph search? Do you have the graph search?
Mm-hmm. I don't like it. Do you like it?
You don't like it? I don't love it. I haven't used it that much. I actually did a story on it recently. Cause I've heard it's good for searching weird stuff like Jews who like bacon. A friend of mine was trying to figure out if Doberman Pinschers skew Democrat or Republican. You know, things like that. I'm not sure about. And in the future or the near future, you'd be able to say like, oh, I'm in Colorado Springs. You know, I have a friend here. Let's see, you know, any restaurants that he's liked in the past. So I don't know how useful that is.
I don't know how useful Doberman Pinschers is would Jews who like bacon. I mean, like Doberman Pinschers. Oh, you've got weird friends, Todd. I mean, what are your friends searching for? You guys have whacked, but that doesn't surprise me. You're a fun guy, so I would suspect that. So, okay, let's talk about Facebook for a second. Facebook fan. You said you actually wrote a story that a Facebook fan, so a fan on Facebook, right? Fan on a Facebook page, is worth $174. Why is that?
Yep. Well, that was a study by a company called SynCaps, which is a Facebook marketer, and they worked, so it didn't look like they were just promoting, what they do. They worked with a third party called HotSpecs to, they had a panel of 2,000 people, et cetera. And somehow they figured out by looking at some major brand pages what a Facebook fan is worth to each of them, and then they came out with an average, which was $174. So if you're a brand, every Facebook fan you have is worth $174.
So we always say, is it really about the fans? But I guess they're saying that it is.
Well, it's not about the fans in terms of like accruing as many fans as humanly possible, which is sort of the first phase. You know, when you saw a lot of us getting online on Facebook for the first time around 2009. It was all about, you know, I want to have more fans. You know, if I'm Coke, I want to have more fans than Pepsi. You know, and if I'm Toyota, I want more fans than Ford, et cetera. And then at a certain point, people realized that a lot of these fans, which they got by, you know, a lot of times these promotions, like, you know, like our page to be entered to win X. And they realized that people did that one time and they never returned. And so officially they're a fan, but they don't really do much for your brand. As a matter of fact, if you're looking at engagement, having a lot of fans and a small engagement actually reflects kind of poorly on your brand. So now the thinking is we don't care as much about how many fans there are. We want the right kind of fans, which seems to be a smarter way to go about it.
Okay. Facebook Home. Why do we care about that? I mean, what do we think is going to happen with Facebook Home?
Well, Facebook Home is the latest manifestation of their sort of mobile strategy. You might remember their IPO was almost a year ago, and you remember they came out and it was this big deal, and then the stock just took a real hammering, in a large part because a lot of investors thought that Facebook had not really figured out their mobile strategy, and all their users are going on this, and they looked at it as sort of like, if you can't monetize mobile, you're going to just lose your whole business to this. So ever since like last summer, they've been really aggressive about saying, we get mobile, we get it. And they've come out with apps here and there. And this was, there was a lot of rumors about a Facebook phone. And this is probably as close as we're going to get to a Facebook phone. What it is, it's basically like a takeover of your phone via an app. It's on Android. It's on Google, Android, which is sort of strange because Google and Facebook are big competitors. But if you download Home and you want it on your phone, and there's a few phones that have it, it's basically a Facebook phone at that point. And it's been out for about a week or so. The Android app has gotten 500,000 downloads at this point. The reviews are kind of middling. So it's unclear how successful that's going to be. Would you want a Facebook phone like that? The thinking is that the people who want it would be teenagers, and at the same time, there are reports that teenagers aren't as into Facebook as they once were.
No, they're not. In fact, there are other places, and I think it's another whole show just about where the next generation and the generation after that are actually how they're going to use social, and it moves so fast. How are we going to be able to stay ahead of the game and not only learn what we're doing, as to your point, we're all trying to figure this out, but how do we continue to move forward? I mean, and I like your point about Android being the launch of, I thought that was kind of odd too, but at the same time, there's more Android users, right? So maybe they just want more users and they're willing to suck it up and say, hey, Google, we're going to let you be the launch of Facebook Home. Well, the other thing is that they have to get permission from Apple to do it. And it looks like Apple at the moment is not interested in doing that, which is understandable. Google Android is like this open platform where anything goes, but Apple's iOS is a very closed off platform, and they're very discriminating, or try to be, about what goes on there. And the idea of making an iPhone into a Facebook phone probably doesn't sit too well with a lot of people at Apple. No, and that's a good point. I had never really thought of it that way. Okay, why is Twitter getting into the music business? I mean, we've got all this other opportunity for music. We haven't really seen Twitter move that forward or make any really big evolutionary changes. And here they are, all of a sudden they make this announcement and they're in the music business, and people are liking Twitter music. What do you think about that? It's great. I was surprised to hear when I wrote the story last week that the primary way that most people discover new music is still radio. Radio is still huge, which makes me wonder how much traction this is going to get if people are really, because one problem with the internet, even on mobile, is it's a very visual medium, and music is not visual at all. It's an auditory phenomenon. So, and I think it's somewhat passive too. I think people like to kind of hear it in the background a couple of times before they say, well, what's that song? I kind of like that. But I could be proven wrong. Maybe that's just my age bias showing. I think maybe if you're 15 years old, you just love, going on Twitter and discovering new music. We'll see how that shakes out. Yeah, I think that is going to yet to be seen kind of deal. Okay, so obviously Twitter's made a big announcement. They're into music, and that's a kind of, let's see how that plays out. Something else that we've been talking about a lot is this idea of public shaming. Okay, let's define, what is public shaming?
Well, it's a sort of phenomenon that I noticed recently is where people, if they have an axe to grind against someone, instead of going to the person or the company or whatever and saying, you did this, I'm upset about it, they go on social media and they say, can you believe what so-and-so did? And then, it becomes this big thing. And it sort of hit the apex like a month or two ago when there was this developers conference, and this woman who was actually a developer relations person for a company, she was offended by these two guys were making jokes behind her, kind of sexual jokes, and so she took a picture of them and put it on her she tweeted it, and one of the guys wound up losing his job, and then she wound up losing her job too. And I wrote a column saying, why couldn't they have just worked this out in person instead of like going online, to a third party and kind of making a big deal of it? It's like, that's the way people have always, handled these sort of things in the past. Why do we have to have this new thing where we're publicly shaming people all the time? It just seems like a bad trend. And I hope this doesn't continue.
Well, and to your point, I mean, it kind of goes back to almost that original conversation around journalism and reporting. And we did talk about that when that came on. I think there were lots of mishaps. I think she could have just said something to these guys. And I honestly don't think they did anything all that bad. And that was we did a whole show on just kind of, discrimination and women in tech and what does that mean? Right. And I mean, because it was a really big conversation, but you got to take some responsibility of what you put on social media. And if you put something out there, you have to expect at some point there could potentially be a repercussion. And I still think, I don't know, Todd, I still think people don't totally get that.
Yeah, and it wasn't just that. I mean, there was another instance where this guy, this photographer, was, claiming that DKNY used his photo without permission. And went on Facebook and made a big deal about it. And so, DKNY then apologized about it, and he was asking for some money, and he gave it to charity, blah, blah, blah. And I asked the guy, I'm like, did you go to DKNY, before you went on Facebook? He's like, no, no. So I'm thinking, well, why not? Why skip that step? Why does this have to be a public spectacle? So.
I think you're absolutely right. Why aren't we taking it to the right person? Why aren't we just doing the right thing? Stay tuned to the Tonya Hall Show. We've got more to talk about with Todd Wasserman, the business and marketing editor at Mashable. Stay tuned and follow us on Twitter at Tonya Hall Radio. We'll be right back, guys.
Stand by for a free offer.
I want to tell you about the Fountain of Youth by Pure Attitude. It's a non-toxic, all-natural, power-packed anti-aging, waterless formula serum with 100% active ingredients. It creates dramatic results, firmer skin, and less visible wrinkles. It's like Botox in a bottle. The Fountain of Youth was developed by award-winning chemist and health and beauty expert to the stars, David Pollack. When recently featured on the Today Show, all they could say was, I love it. This incredible product increases skin oxygenation, boosts collagen, increases hydration and cell renewal, and results in a tighter, firmer appearance to your face with less visible wrinkles. And now, we want to let you try it for free. Go to freefountainofyouth.com and you'll receive a free 14-day trial of the Fountain of Youth. Just pay a small shipping and handling fee. It makes a great gift because it's beautifully packaged, and you'll love the new you after using dermatologist approved and recommended the Fountain of Youth. Go to freefountainofyouth.com.
Lamar Advertising has always been the premier provider for outdoor advertising in state. They now have expanded their great selection of billboard, digital, and transit advertising to include all of northern Colorado. So if you're looking to target consumers in Boulder County, Longmont, Loveland, Fort Collins, or Greeley, you can't beat the value of outdoor advertising. You can reach people where they live and work 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. For more information, visit lamar.com. That's LAMAR.com. Or you can call them 800-493-5700. 800-493-4411. That's 800-493-4411. Lamar Advertising, the first name in local advertising for Northern Colorado. Visit them online, lamar.com, or call 800-493-4411.
Stocks are slumping after an unexpected decrease in U.S. home sales. From Bloomberg World Headquarters in New York, I'm Charlie Pellet. Previously owned homes fell 0.6% to a 4.92 million annual rate last month, according to the National Association of Realtors. That report is damping optimism in the world's largest economy. Michael Shaul is chairman and CEO of Marketfield Asset Management. He says despite all of the headlines about Europe, Italy is a place investors have to consider.
We actually like Italy. We own a decent amount of Italian equities and have done since the end of last year. And I think there's a couple of things going on. First of all, there's a real difference between corporate activity and economic data. Right. And corporate activity in Italy is okay.
The Dow Jones Industrial Average is down 60 points to 14,487, a drop of 0.4%. S&P 500 index down 3 points, a decline of 0.2%. NASDAQ is up 0.1%. That's a Bloomberg Market Minute.
And now a check of the temperature at the Denver International Airport, where the current reported temperature is 45 degrees, 7 degrees on the Celsius scale.
Darling, you got to let me know.
Welcome back to the Tonya Hall Show, where we embrace the power of the web. Everything that's happening on the internet, whether it's following news and information that's happening not only in the United States but abroad, what's happening with business, what's happening with social platforms. And our guest today, I love him, he's super fun, Todd Wasserman. He is a business and marketing editor at Mashable. And we've talked about everything, I think, Todd, about Google Glasses, and I want to get to that. But I have to say, finally, Kevin, you played a song that I recognized. Who was that?
That was The Clash.
Was it?
Should I stay or should I go?
Should I stay or should I go? Well, we're going to stay for at least another 15 minutes or 10 or so. But I did like, okay, so I could have listened to that song, but I was like, finally, when I recognize. Okay, Google Glasses. They're going to tell us who's staying and who's going. You know, you and I were talking about this before the show started, Todd. I mean, it was almost like there was so much that was happening last week in tech, but it was almost like if you talked about something else, it was almost like a diss against, what was happening in news. It just seemed so irrelevant and important. No, people almost got mad at you people, in fact, this was a big conversation, actually, scheduled posts. In fact, people who schedule content to appear. In fact, Guy Kawasaki, I think, got kind of raked across the coals. What do you think about scheduled posts before we get to Google Glasses?
Bad idea, yeah. It's okay to schedule, I think, but you have to have a human who has access to it 24/7 to say, like, oh, maybe that's, this is a very sensitive time. Maybe I shouldn't be out there promoting this thing right now. And that last week there were plenty of times like that. Friday night, especially during that manhunt situation in Watertown, we didn't tweet any kind of, we didn't promote any tech stories or anything like that, because in that stream at that moment, if you were promoting stuff that was not related to it, it just seemed like you're so clueless. It just seemed like, aren't you paying attention to what's going on? And even afterwards, it was like there's a period where I was waiting for other people to kind of promote their stuff before I figured it was okay to talk about something else. So.
Is it okay to get back in the water, so to speak? I mean, because you're right. I mean, if you tweet, and I think you made a good point. I think you can schedule content. I mean, I'm an advocate that some scheduled content is okay, especially if you're a news outlet like Mashable, or if you've got all kinds of stories because you're trying to get more content out there. But to your point, if something happens, you've got to be ready to react. We saw that time and time again with, some big news story. And, I think it's happened. I want to say it was Chrysler. And I'm not sure, but one of the major automotive companies, we saw it happen even with the NRA when there was the shooting and the NRA had a scheduled post. And, you know, it isn't that you are heartless. It isn't that you aren't really paying, but you're not paying attention to social media, and you've got to clean up your posts. You've got to stop those kinds of things. And if you're in a business and you do schedule content, you've got to be aware of what's happening in the world. And that's the whole trend of social media, which, good segue right here. Google Glasses actually keeps us even more in tune with what's happening. Robert Scoble posted, I forget how many hundreds of pictures. I mean, people are getting to test these glasses out. They're very expensive. Do you have Google Glasses, Todd?
No, it's difficult to get them. You had to either know somebody or you had to win what was basically an essay contest and then pay $1,500 for them to be like in one of the early people to get this. So yeah, it's rare to see them. I've seen a couple of tech CEOs sporting them around lately, and it's sort of, you know, I've only been at Mashable for 2 years. I wasn't here when the iPad came out, and you know, the iPhone. But I think this, if you look at like the iPad, the iPhone, I mean the iPod, the iPhone, the iPad, I think this is the next major thing in that vein, and it's not from Apple, it's from Google. I think Google Glass is going to be really huge, and I don't think a lot of people realize, you know, how big it's going to be. And I think in a couple of years, everyone's going to be sporting, not everybody, but a lot of people are going to be sporting some version of this.
Well, I'm excited. As long as they get some really cool design. I wear glasses. I was wearing glasses. I'm going to sound like Barbara Mandrell or whoever it was that said I was country before country wasn't cool. I was wearing glasses before it was cool to wear them. I've worn contacts for a long time, but especially here in Colorado, it's very dry, which is a good thing most of the time. But it's hard to wear contacts, and so I just wear glasses. And I was kind of excited about Google Glasses, assuming I can do the prescription. I mean, we'll just have to see how that actually pans out. But Tim Moore, who comes on the show pretty frequently, actually used to work for the New York Times. He's a Google Glass tester, and he just posted, navigation is just one of the ways Google Glass could revolutionize in the car experience. Your car is the killer app for Google Glass. What do you think about that? Are you a car aficionado?
Not really, but I think some states have already come out and said that they do not want you wearing Google Glass while you're driving. They think it's distracting. It's sort of like texting while driving. But there are also General Motors, among others, is working on sort of a smart windshield, which they use in the military right now, which would accomplish the same thing on your windshield. Instead of wearing the glasses, you might have, you know, maybe mapping information or, you know, maybe something like telling you where a nearby restaurant is or something like that. I could see that catching on. I think Google Glass while you're driving would be distracting. I kind of agree with law enforcement on that.
Yeah, I mean, it does seem like it would, but it would seem like that would be that way just walking down the street. I mean, like just being, I mean, so that's always been the kind of, wait a minute, this is a distraction. I mean, there have been, in fact, you guys actually had a conference, and one of the speakers, you have lots of conferences, but one of the conferences you had was one of your speakers, and I'm trying to remember which one it was, but you might remember, he talked about it was impossible to multitask, and our brains are not made to multitask. And we all like to brag that we can, I'm on the phone, but I'm also using social media at the same time. And I do that here at the show. I'm tweeting right now. I'm Facebooking. I'm doing all this stuff. But really, I can't listen to you. I can't talk on the radio and do all of this thing according to that. What do you say about that?
Yeah, I actually did an article on this recently. I talked to a few like cognitive, you know, scientists. And one guy had a great illustration. He's like, you know, my mother used to call me while I was watching football, and she would just hang up because, you know, I wasn't paying attention to the conversation. I was just watching football, and, you know, couldn't do two things like that at the same time. And there's another great illustration where there's this video of a bunch of people playing basketball, and you're supposed to watch one of the balls, you know, and it says count how many times it's passed. And in the middle of it, there's a guy in a gorilla suit that walks by, and counting the balls, you don't see the guy in the gorilla suit. Which is a great sort of illustration of you can only focus on one thing at a time. And I think when it comes to Google Glass, that's going to be, people are going to discover that pretty quickly, that you can't walk down the street and check your emails without the danger of walking into a tree or something like that. And that's, you know, it's when you talk to Google, they say most of the time you're going to have, Google Glass is going to be off. But I don't think everybody's going to have off most of the time. I think people are going to abuse it, so.
Well, yeah. I mean, think about how connected we are with Facebook. You think, oh, they're just going to check Facebook at the end of the day. Are we kidding? You check it, when you're at a stoplight, which is probably bad. You check it when you're in line at the post office or whatever it is you're doing. You're getting on your mobile and you're connected. I mean, it's that whole like multi-screen experience and always being connected. And, we talk a lot even about just television and advertising and how you're distracted because maybe I'm on Twitter at the same time I'm watching my favorite television show. So am I really absorbing the commercial? And then you've got the penetration rate, if you will, of the content. Are we really following the show? Are we really following the advertising? And is it going to affect us the same way that it has in the past? I know that's something you probably are looking at as well. In fact, what is the next big thing? What are you looking at right now?
I think, Google Glass is the next big thing, and it's wearable computing. Apple is supposedly working on a wristwatch, and Samsung's working on a smart wristwatch, and there are Google Glass knockoffs already out there. I think that's definitely where things are going, this wearable computing thing, which wasn't really a thing a year or two ago, and I think it's going to be really big in the next, by the end of this decade, it's going to be kind of ubiquitous. And I don't think it's a great trend necessarily. I think it's bad enough when people have their cell phones. You can have a bunch of people sitting in the same room and they're not talking to each other because they're all checking their phones. I think with Google Glass, it's going to be even more so. Or I don't think it's a great thing.
It doesn't seem like it is, but I know we're all excited about it. So I don't know if there's any stopping it, Todd. Thanks for coming on the show. I always love having you come on and love following you and your family. And you're just such a real, genuine guy. And you're super upfront about what you're learning as well as the rest of us. Thanks for coming on the show today.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. That was Todd Wasserman. He is the business and marketing editor at Mashable. I'm sure if you listen to the show, you probably do follow Mashable. And if you don't, you probably should. It's certainly a place where I go to get the latest and greatest in tech news. There's a lot of outlets out there, but Mashable is pretty quick to the start. And Todd Wasserman is the business and marketing editor, as I pointed out. You can follow him by going to @ToddWasserman on Twitter or find me at Tonya Hall Radio. We'll be back tomorrow with Porter Gale talking about your network is your net worth. We'll be back then. We'll be back then.